Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
It's hats on the hill as we head to Washington, D.C. for NCBA's annual legislative conference. We've got a special episode that takes you inside this event and explains why it's critical to the success of the beef industry.
Now, from the Denver headquarters of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, it's NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. Each spring, cattlemen and women from all around the country travel to Washington, D.C. for the annual NCBA Legislative Conference. It's a chance to meet face-to-face with policymakers and deliver a unified message about the issues and regulations that can impact the beef industry. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Brian Baxter has more on this important event.
This week does provide a great opportunity for all of you to help offset and affect the change we need here in Washington, D.C.
Part of that change in Washington, D.C., at least for a few days, included plenty of boots and cowboy hats on Capitol Hill as cattlemen and women walked the halls of Congress.
Congressmen and senators need to hear from the cattle people and the cowboys around the country about what's going on out in the real world and how the regulations and the laws and the trade issues that we're dealing with affect our business every day.
We producers don't have a lot of time and an opportunity to come and talk to these people, whereas the activists and the lobbyists are here every day. So they do need to hear from people who actually fed that morning and came to town that afternoon to talk to them.
But it's really important to get producers here. I know that our congressional delegates appreciate it. They want to hear from their constituents. If we aren't here, somebody else is there in our place. So it's a long ways. It's not inexpensive to get here, but we have to be that voice because obviously we have to get our message to those folks.
During the annual NCBA Legislative Conference, the new Farm Bill was one issue. Congressman Ted Yoho of Florida, a large animal veterinarian, told NCBA members he's pleased to see the bill includes funding for an FMD vaccine bank to be prepared to stop any outbreak of foot and mouth disease.
Knowing how diseases can spread, if that were to come into this country, the economic impact that we saw would be anywhere from $75 to $150 billion impact immediately. It would hit our GDP by, they estimate, 4%. It would stop exports today.
No doubt all kinds of threats to U.S. beef exports, including tariffs and potential trade wars, were on the agenda as cattlemen and women realize the value those exports deliver to their bottom line.
We have trade issues. Certainly the tariffs that have come up recently with China are a concern to us.
Trade is important to producers back home in North Dakota, valued at almost $300 per head last year alone. Significant dollars that impact our bottom line. And so we want to be very engaged in these conversations to make sure that the beef industry is protected, that we have those opportunities with important trade partners, whether it's China or Canada or others.
The NCBA group also closely questioned the administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration about pending regulations that may impact livestock haulers.
Certainly one of the things that's important right now that we're dealing with is electronic logging devices on trucks and the hours of service that go along with it. We have a live animal that we have to transport from far reaches of the country, and the regulations as they currently stand are going to limit how many hours our trucks can move. And so the question is, what are we going to do with that live animal when the truck driver has to rest? So we're working on that.
The ELDs is the big thing. We can change some rules. We can keep filing for extensions and exemptions, but the next administration comes in that's not friendly to ag, and they just get all rolled back. So we want to try to get some permanent things done legislatively that stick.
No shortage of issues for the beef cattle industry at the NCBA Legislative Conference in Washington. I'm Brian Baxter reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
With us now is the NCBA's Senior Vice President of Policy, Colin Woodall. Of course, Colin is based in their Washington, D.C. office. It's springtime, and that means it's time for the NCBA Spring Legislative Conference. Another great turnout. Hundreds and hundreds of cattlemen and cattlewomen from across the country joining us here in Washington, D.C., and for an important reason.
There's two things that you can always count on in Washington, D.C. in the spring, and that is the return of the cherry blossoms and cowboy hats on Capitol Hill. And this has been a great opportunity to send our members up on the Hill to engage in the process, to talk one-on-one with their members of Congress and their staff. We're here every day, and our team is working on Capitol Hill. We're working these issues. We're talking to these members of Congress. But ultimately, when somebody shows up who has either voted for that member of Congress or possibly voted against that member of Congress, all of a sudden you elevate and enhance the conversation. So that's why having our members come to Washington, D.C. is so important in helping make us successful.
And we hear it time and time again from these members of Congress or agency personnel or even some of their key staffers that they like to hear directly from people like ranchers or cattlemen and cattlewomen.
They do, because when they're sitting there talking to somebody from back home, they can ask about how the weather is and what's going on. What are the challenges that may be in Nebraska that they're not necessarily seeing in Georgia, for example. They also have the opportunity to talk about people that they know back home. But what they do is they have that hometown rapport that really helps drive home the message that we are trying to deliver, and that is the action by these members of Congress here in Washington, D.C. has a direct input or impact on the success of our producers in those states and in those districts.
Well, you guys are working on a ton of big issues every single day back here in Washington, D.C. I mean, just throw out a few of them that the NCBA, whether it be in the Denver office or you folks here in Washington, D.C., are working on behalf of your membership.
We have some really important policy priorities this year. One that we're spending a lot of time on is the electronic logging device issue, ELDs of the Department of Transportation. We have to find a way to address the hours of service to allow our members enough drive time to get cattle to their next destination without having to stop for 10 or 12 hours for rest. It's imperative for the welfare of the animal that happen. And so we're really working with both the House and Senate to get legislation introduced that would give us the hours needed to be able to make that happen, because the last thing that we want as an industry and the last thing the Department of Transportation wants is a load of dead cattle on the side of the road because of a rule that just doesn't work for our industry. And we're also spending a lot of time on trade as we continue to try to find ways to sell our product around the world and break down trade barriers. And as everybody knows, trade is a really hot topic in Washington, D.C. these days.
Well, it's always good to see cowboy hats and cowboy boots on Capitol Hill. And of course, when it comes to the NCBA, they always have boots and hats on Capitol Hill working for their members and even their non-members 365 days a year. Again, Colin, thanks for being with us on Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Thank you, Russell.
All right, again, Colin Woodall, the NCBA's Senior Vice President of Policy.
If you'd like to stay up to date on all the key issues and events from D.C., one way is by becoming a member of NCBA. Members receive the Beltway Beef newsletter, a weekly update straight from Washington that gives valuable insights on the key policy initiatives that may impact your business. To get the Beltway Beef newsletter and more, join NCBA by calling 1-866-233-3872, or you can visit the website ncba.org. Still ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll dig into some of the important issues that were discussed with lawmakers during the legislative conference. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Saddle up and make your way to Denver, Colorado for the 2018 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting. This is your chance to stay up to date on beef industry trends and policies. Meet with industry leadership and your fellow cattlemen and women. Plus, you'll get insights on hot topics at the Issues Forums. Mark your calendar for the 2018 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting, August 1st to the 4th in Denver. Find out more at ncba.org.
When you're in the cattle business, no matter how much it's a business, it still starts with cattle. It's this basic notion that sits at the core of how we approach things at Behringer Ingelheim. We understand when you put the cattle first, it just naturally leads to doing the right things. If you want to do well in this business, you start by doing right. Take care of the cattle, and they'll take care of you.
Welcome back. Today, we're focusing on NCBA's annual legislative conference, which gives producers a chance to meet with their U.S. representatives and senators about a variety of issues affecting the beef industry. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Russell Nemitz has more from Washington, D.C.
Well, a highlight of any conference that the National Cattlemen's Beef Association hosts, like this one, the legislative conference held every spring here in the nation's capital, is getting the opportunity to catch up with old friends and champions of the U.S. livestock industry. And that's what we're going to do exactly today, because luck would have it, we have Wyoming Senator John Barrasso with us. And Senator Barrasso, you're also the chairman of the Senate's Environment and Public Works Committee. Always a lot going on in the world of U.S. agriculture. And you have been one of the biggest supporters of the U.S. beef cattle industry since your tenure in the Senate, and even when you were back home in the Cowboy State as part of the Wyoming State Legislature. Big priority for the NCBA and these cattlemen, cattlewomen, trade.
Well, it is, and beef is number one cash crop in Wyoming. So it's really critically important that we continue to have overseas markets. We've discussed this with the president from an agriculture standpoint, and the trade that the president's talking about is a double-edged sword. He's right about the manipulations by China, but we need to keep these markets open so we can continue to export our crops. People around the world know that U.S. beef is the best in the world, and they want it. So it's a privilege to be able to work with this great group, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and work for the betterment of basically what people want. And it's good for our economy, but it's good for the world to be able to have our product.
Well, we have to be able to get those beef cattle to market, and one of the big impediments here of late have been the Department of Transportation's electronic logging devices and hours of service. How important is it to get a long-term solution instead of just a Band-Aid fix here and there and extending waivers and et cetera, and look towards a permanent solution, something that truly works for livestock haulers?
Well, we need a permanent solution. What happens is when government writes regulations, one size fits all, it hardly ever works for people who know on the ground what really works. And it makes it very difficult for those of us who believe in our freedoms. Now, we want safety on the roads. We want to make sure that things are done right, but we need a permanent solution. The Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, clearly understands the issues on our side on this, and we're just trying to find a way to permanently put in place things that will work for all of us.
And when you're back home in Wyoming, if you ever need a conversation starter at breakfast, do you ever just talk about grizzly bears and wolves and the Endangered Species Act and how we need to fix that too?
Well, it absolutely has been hijacked. The Endangered Species Act has been hijacked by the environmental extremists. Right now, we know that 99% of the counties have some species that is on a list that is interfering with activity that we need to have done in terms of making progress in our country. When I think of the Endangered Species Act, I think of it actually should be there for species that are endangered. I think the people that voted for this, people like Cliff Hansen from Wyoming a long time ago, would be very bothered by what they see now and how this is used and how the lawsuits continue to come into place. I was, against the wolves in the first place in Yellowstone. They've been devastating to our livestock and our wildlife. We now have, 1,700 wolves in the entire Rocky Mountain West. It's been a travesty. I think we need to modernize this act, and if something goes on the list, we need to know when it comes off. How do you know when the tank is full? What's the plan for action? I'll tell you, for every 100 species that have been put on the list, only 3 have come off. Now, I'm a doctor. If for every 100 people I admitted to the hospital, only 3 recovered enough to get out of the hospital, I ought to lose my license. And this is the same way that the Endangered Species Act has been used, hijacked, and misused, and we need to change it.
Last question for you, Senator. At events like this, like the NCBA Spring Legislative Conference, how important is it for you to have the opportunity not just to visit with Wyoming cattlemen and women who stop by the office, but also others from across the country to come and tell their story about why they're so passionate about raising the best food and fiber in the world?
Well, it's important to be able to visit with people. I get home to Wyoming every weekend. I mean, we have a Centennial Ranch celebration for these families that have been through everything over 100 years, have kept it in the family, and you visit with them and how'd they do it, because they've been through flood, fire, the whole thing, and the biggest challenge they've had has been the feds, the federal government. So you hear the stories from all around the country, and we're united by that, because as a people, we are independent, we're resilient, we're self-reliant, and my message from Wyoming to Washington is leave us alone. Our land, our water, our air, leave us alone.
And we'll leave it at that. Thank you for being with us on Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Yeah, thanks so much, Russell.
Again, we've been visiting with Wyoming Senator John Barrasso.
Thanks, Russell, for that report. One of the most important things cattlemen and women can do is join the fight to protect our industry by becoming a member of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Joining is easy. Just give us a call at 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. For policymakers, the Legislative Conference is a clear demonstration of how those in the beef industry can unify to deliver a message about the issues that could make or break our livelihood. Russell Nemitz had a chance to talk with one of those lawmakers.
Well, as we continue our coverage here on Cattlemen to Cattlemen from this year's Legislative Conference here in Washington, D.C., it's our distinct pleasure to have Congressman Doug LaMalfa from California with us on the program, and he represents California's 1st Congressional District, which is in Northern California. And Doug, as you put it, it is in way North California.
Yes, sir. Nowhere near San Francisco. So it's God's country up there, and our cattlemen, cattlewomen are very integral to our, not only the economy, but our society up there. And so it's great to have the hats, the big buckles, and the boots here in Washington, D.C. So it's a welcome sight.
Well, we're happy to have some buckles and boots from members of Congress like you still manning some of these offices back in Washington, D.C. too. That's right. But you said you've been working with cattlemen and cattlewomen for a lot of years now, whether it be back here in Washington, D.C. or back in your home state of California. And before we talk about a big issue here of late, I mean, you've been working with them about making sure they stay on these private and public lands and keep raising that great protein we call beef.
Yes, sir. It is what's for dinner. I mean, it's still what people want, and I think that the more we can do to have our public lands used properly, you know, grazing is a plus for public lands, and keeping down fire danger and the cattle out there stirring the ground actually is a positive, although that message doesn't get out there very much. So we need to do everything we can to, you know, in my area there's too much juniper growing, so juniper removal is important in my area and the Nevada side. The issue still with sage hen, with wolf introduction, for crying out loud. There's a lot of things coming at our producers out there that we need to get remedies on. You know, the wolf is a deal where there's plenty of wolves in this country, but why do they have to be in every county to not be considered endangered? A lot of nonsense with all that, so let's quit adding to the burden of the people that produce what we need.
Congressman, a big issue that the National Cattlemen's Beef Association has been working on for a lot of years now in preparation for an important deadline, which has now since been extended for another 6 months, is these electronic logging devices and hours of service for those men and women who haul our livestock to and from market. You've been a champion on this ELD and hours of service issue. Tell us why.
Well, obviously one size doesn't fit all. Ever since I've been in the political world, I found that one size doesn't fit all, especially for us rural folks and the issues we face. They make policy in the cities, they make policy in the East Coast that has really little to do with what we're doing. So on the ELD issue, for example, when we had that opportunity in the Trans Committee here just a couple of weeks ago to get the case in front of the Secretary, you know, myself and Mr. Babin from Texas, a couple other guys were really making the case on that, and I think we did achieve some at least delay in that. Now, ELDs unfortunately look like they're here to stay for everybody. Maybe we can carve out, you know, certain, you know, livestock industries. For crying out loud, Hollywood has it, and as I mentioned in committee, I'm much happier with the product coming out of this organization than what comes out of Hollywood as far as its sustenance and usability. But that said, you know, we need a break on this, and so we got a temporary one. It needs to be a break long enough to get in place an improvement to this whole mess we have with hours of service, which is really the crux of the issue. ELDs, again, large companies like them, and it doesn't fit every mom and pop, but if we can at least transition to something that's going to work long term for everybody in the unique livestock industry or Hollywood or, you know, hazardous waste haulers even, we need flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know the livestock industry appreciates your hard work on that, and trying to distinguish Hollywood from the cattle industry, I mean, pretty easy. They're fiction, we're fact, right? But
well, Hollywood has always romanticized this industry for many, many, many years. You know, the Sundance Channel, all that stuff. So, you know, at the core, people like what you do, what we do. I'm a farmer in my real life too, so if anybody needs rice straw, let me know. But that said, I'm, people at the core level appreciate what we do. We just need government to understand that. Washington, D.C., we have a good chance at that with the new administration. State of California, please pray for us, okay? But it's really a really difficult thing, but well worth it. The family, the long-time legacy, I'm proud of the people in this industry.
Well, and our industry appreciates having men and women back you in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate who also understand what we do on a daily basis and go to work back here and fight for our way of life and keeping it that way for future generations too. So thank you, Congressman.
The best days when I was in Sacramento is when the steak and egg day for breakfast, but when the hats were in town there, I feel the same relief here to see backup come into Washington, D.C. So thank you all, and God bless all you.
Absolutely. Again, Congressman Doug LaMalfa from California's 1st Congressional District, way up in Northern California, north of San Francisco, like he likes to say, closer to Nevada and Oregon, if you will. Our thanks to him for joining us here on Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Thanks, Russell. We'll be back to you in just a moment. Still to come on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, NCBA's President Kevin Kester shares his thoughts on the value of the Legislative Conference. Don't go away. We'll have more right after this.
Do you know all you need to about working cattle? Did you know there are proven methods that can reduce stress for the animals, for you and your crew? Now there's an easy way for you to learn from the experts who can help sharpen your stockmanship and stewardship skills. In interactive sessions, you'll learn better ways to work cattle more efficiently, skills that can help put more money in your pocket. Find out more and locate an upcoming event near you at the website stockmanshipandstewardship.org.
Say goodbye to your toughest pasture and rangeland weeds for good. Because one product offers season-long control, handles the widest spectrum of broadleaf weeds, and clears the way for increased forage with greater grazing flexibility. So you get more beef per acre at a cost that can't be beat. It's Grazon Next HL herbicide, and if it's in your pastures, plain and simple, weeds won't be.
Welcome back. NCBA's annual legislative conference gives producers like you and me a chance to play a part in the political process. Russell Nemitz caught up with NCBA President Kevin Kester to get his take on the value of this important event.
There's always a ton of important issues being worked on in our nation's capital that impact cattlemen and cattlewomen nationwide. That's why the National Cattlemen's Beef Association has one of its offices located right in the heart of our nation's capital, and each year it gets to introduce members from across the country to not only its office, but all the legislative activities that are going on here in Washington, D.C. as part of its spring legislative conference. And with us on the segment today is the NCBA's president, Kevin Kester from California. And here we are at this year's spring legislative conference. Another great turnout, as folks can see at home. And truly, this is a very important time of the year for the U.S. beef cattle industry.
It is. We have several hundred members of NCBA here in Washington, D.C. Working the Hill, boots on the hill, hats on the hill. We make a true difference when our members can go and talk to their local members of Congress and their senators from their states and give our message of what our priorities are, what's important to us, and things that will keep us in business back at home.
You know, I know throughout the year officers like yourself and other NCBA staffers work the Hill pretty hard, but how important is it for actual cattlemen and cattlewomen themselves to, like you said, put their hats and put their boots on Capitol Hill and meet with those key members of Congress or key staff?
When I'm in D.C. Throughout the year, I get comments based upon what members of Congress and their staffs see from this week in Washington, D.C. Our hats, people remember that. And so that remembrance carries through for the year. And it's really important because we make an impact of our relatively few members compared to other industries. We make a big impression. And for our members to take the time to leave their farms and ranches to come here and promote our industry, it's really important.
Well, certainly when members of Congress or their key staffers see the NCBA logo or even the cattle pins on the lapels, I mean, they know that they're talking with the very men and women who make up the heart of this beef cattle industry in this country.
I like to tell our members and elected officials we're the salt of the earth, and people truly believe that. And so it is really important for us to spend the time, get our message out, and help our policies to be successful in our businesses.
Before I let you go, what are some of those key legislative priorities for 2018 and beyond?
Boy, without doubt, trade is at the top of the list right now. So we have multiple trade policy and issues going on that we're working on. We have electronic logging device issues that we're working on, and I think we're going to find some solutions this year. We have regulatory issues, lots of other stuff going on. Our plate's never empty.
No, it's not, and we certainly wish you the best as you tackle some of those big issues, not only this time of the year, but throughout the rest of 2018 and into 2019.
Appreciate that, Russell.
All right, again, we've been visiting with Kevin Kester, the president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association from California.
It's always gratifying to see how some of the state cattle organizations round up a large contingent of members to lobby on behalf of the U.S. beef industry. Here's Russell Nemitz again with a look at one state organization's experience while in D.C.
Joining us on the program from the Alabama Cattlemen's Association is their executive VP, Aaron Beasley. And Aaron, talk about the experience of not just bringing yourself, but members, cattlemen and cattlewomen from your home state of Alabama to a conference like this one every spring.
Well, I think it's a very unique experience for our producers. Obviously, many of them maybe have not had the opportunity to come to Washington, D.C., but to have that personal interaction with our congressmen and senators that are so supportive during the year of us also gives us a chance to, a lot of our communication is email and calls during the year, but to get here and see them face to face and just tell them thank you. In Alabama, we're very blessed to have some extremely supportive congressmen and senators, and just enjoy visiting with them. We've got a lot of topics that we wanted to cover today, and just give them a big thank you for what they do for us.
So what was it like taking some of your delegation up to Capitol Hill today and having the opportunity to visit with members of the House and Senate, or if not them, some of their key staffers that know a thing or two about agriculture?
I think it's very enlightening for our producers because they do learn that those staffers, they play such a key role, an integral role for those the delegation and just the different topics and all the issues that they have to face on a day-to-day basis. Gives us a chance to show them that we're doing what we're supposed to during the year to keep them abreast of those issues. And again, when you walk in with a constituent, it means a lot. And the cattle industry is the second largest ag commodity in the state of Alabama, and we're happy to be able to bring producers face-to-face with those folks and just remind them how important beef is to our state.
I know Brian Baxter and I got to sit on a few of these calls here on Capitol Hill, and for me personally, it's fun to watch these men and women share the story and just hear the passion as they're delivering their positive and important message to these different members of Congress.
Absolutely. Certainly a key issue that we're working on right now is hours of service and electronic logging devices, and I know for our producers that were here, it's a direct impact on them. If we don't get this fixed and changed, it will have serious implications on what they do on a yearly and day-to-day basis. And so to be able to hear those stories, I can talk to these folks all day long, but to get those stories, those personal insights from our producers, it's a huge impact, and I know that it's going to help us as we progress along with the changes that we need to see with the ELD law.
Well, in the ELD, hours of service is just one of the many things. We also covered the Farm Bill, we covered trade, we covered modernizing the Endangered Species Act, which is long overdue. So where do you go from here after you leave Washington, D.C. with these members? Do you go home and try to let them tell the story and empower other members to maybe join us out here next year, or if not here, maybe at a mid-year meeting or an annual convention, hopefully?
I think it definitely helps. They have the personal experience now, and I think they're going to share this great experience with other members of NCBA, other potential members, and also it gives us a good chance to explain that partnership between NCBA and the state affiliates. And I know how much we rely on the staff here in Washington, D.C. They're top notch. They're some of the best that I think we could possibly have, and it just makes the whole wheel go around, makes the cycle continue. So.
Absolutely, the circle of life, as we all know it to be. It is so true. Thanks for being with us on Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Thank you, Russell.
Again, it's been our pleasure to visit with Aaron Beasley, the Executive Vice President of the Alabama Cattlemen's Association.
Thanks, Russell. We'll check in with you again in a few minutes. Still to come, we'll talk fake meat and explain why this was such an important topic at the legislative conference. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you're connected with the beef cattle business, then you should like the NCBA page on Facebook. The NCBA Facebook page shares photos, news, and valuable information about the beef cattle industry. You can also follow the NCBA Twitter feed at BeefUSA. So stay in touch with NCBA on Facebook and Twitter.
What does it mean to be an American cattleman? It means you have what it takes where it counts. On the inside. At Ritchie, we understand that. It's what's on the inside that defines us. We share the same values: ingenuity, commitment, sense of pride. These are the values that built this country. They're the values that built this company. Ritchie, proud to be a partner to the American cattlemen since 1921.
Welcome back. One new policy priority for NCBA this year is fake meat. As you can imagine, it was a hot topic at the legislative conference in Washington, D.C. Russell Nemitz has more on fake meat and what NCBA is doing to combat this issue.
Well, a big issue that's grabbed a lot of headlines here of late, and one that has certainly grabbed the attention of livestock organizations like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, is the topic of fake meat products. And with us is the Director of Government Affairs for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, based in their Washington, D.C. office, Danielle Beck. And first, Danielle, walk us through what the heck really are these fake meat products? What do you mean by these?
What are fake meat products? That's a really good question. When we talk about fake meat products, we've got two products in mind. The first are plant-based imitation burgers or meat products. They're already on the market and they're regulated under FDA jurisdiction. The other set of fake meat that we're referring to are products that are grown in a lab. It scientifically may meet the definition of a meat product, but it's a product that's grown in a petri dish.
Now, NCBA just here recently actually laid out its principles regarding these fake meat products.
Yes, sir. We laid out a set of principles and we asked USDA to advocate on our behalf and take action, two separate sets of action actually. First, we asked USDA to engage with FDA on our behalf in regards to the appropriate labeling of imitation products under their own jurisdiction. And the second request was to ask USDA to assert regulatory jurisdiction over lab-grown meat products.
Now, Danielle, as I understand, those of us in the beef cattle industry can really learn a lot from our friends in the dairy industry regarding issues like this.
Well, hopefully we can learn by not letting their mistakes be our own. It's really interesting. I didn't realize this. The dairy industry has been fighting with FDA to enforce the existing standards of identity and the laws that exist under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act since 2000. It's critically important that as these new lab products come to the market, they're appropriately labeled. And we really need help getting FDA to enforce the existing law when it comes to beef products and plant products that are under their jurisdiction.
And Danielle, I really just have one more question before I let you go. Regarding fake meat products, where do we go from here? How can we solicit help from these cattlemen and cattlewomen out in the countryside that are raising these wonderful proteins like beef?
Well, that's an excellent question. We're going to need your help. We need our producers' help to appropriately apply pressure to the FDA. We are working with our allies on Capitol Hill, and hopefully leaders at USDA will help to bring FDA into compliance with the law. On the lab meat side of things, it's a long-term game. Hopefully USDA will assert jurisdiction over those products, and then we can work on appropriate labeling and descriptive terms from there. We know that beef is produced by an actual cow raised by a farmer or rancher, and we are confident that we are setting ourselves on a a successful path, or a path to success, where lab-grown products and imitation plant products will not be able to use the term beef.
As always, we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Again, we've been visiting with Danielle Beck, the NCBA's Director of Government Affairs, and telling us what some of the NCBA's priorities and principles and guidelines of what they believe should be in regards to these fake meat products. With that, we'll go ahead and send it back to you.
It's clear that fake meat is an important issue that NCBA will be monitoring very closely. We asked cattlemen and women at Legislative Conference to share their thoughts on fake meat. Here's what they had to say.
Fake meat is going to be a hard problem for us to solve or deal with in the future if we don't get the nomenclature of what they're developing separated from what we have already called beef for many, many, many years. It could be a confusing market to the consumer.
Oh, I read some articles on that the other day, and I just see red, because how can they call it meat if you grow it in a laboratory? The only way meat is if it comes off a critter. And fake meat, false advertising is the first thing that comes to my mind.
One of the good things is we're pretty confident in our product. Both safety, nutrition, health, I think we got a great story to tell. But obviously we want to maintain that label as meat because we know what we've invested in that. So fake meat, I think actually if people start to look at it, if it's lab raised, it's not gluten free, it's got GMOs, right? We got all the stories on our side for a change. So I think we got a good story to tell. But we do need to be attentive. We need to pay attention to it.
It's something I guess we should have seen coming earlier on, given the soy milk and almond milk and coconut milk thing that aren't actually milk, but so NCBA, I appreciate their efforts in stepping up and getting ahead of this and separating real meat from fake meat. Fake meat has nothing to do with meeting the world's food needs or anything like that. And I think at the end of the day, consumers are going to choose beef.
If you'd like to support the beef industry, why not become an NCBA member? By doing so, you'll be sustaining the work of NCBA in defending and advocating for the cattle industry in Washington, D.C. It's easy to do. Just call 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. We're not done talking about Legislative Conference. When we come back, we'll have more reaction from Washington, D.C. on how this event can impact the policy-making process. Plus, we'll check in with the always entertaining Baxter Black. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
There is a new world out there, revealing itself in unpredictable ways. A world that demands more from the land and those who grow, farm, and build on it. This new world calls for the ingenuity to get more out of it, while preserving as much as we can. After all, to stay ahead of tomorrow, we need to be equipped for it today.
Don't miss your chance to read the National Cattlemen. It's the official publication of NCBA, and it's packed with timely news and information about the issues and events that affect your cattle business. Plus, the National Cattlemen includes producer education, cattle market insights, and more. A subscription is free when you become a member of NCBA. Join now by calling 866-233-3872 or on the web at ncba.org.
We've been discussing NCBA's Legislative Conference, which offers cattlemen and women from around the country a chance to meet with key congressional and agency influencers to articulate the beef industry's policy priorities. Let's toss it back out to Russell Nemitz one more time for more reaction to this important gathering.
A lot happens back here in Washington, D.C. on a daily basis that impacts U.S. beef cattle operations nationwide. Thankfully, though, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association works every single day with their own cowboy hats and boots on Capitol Hill, making sure that cattlemen and cattlewomen's interests are always well represented here with members of Congress. And one of those people that are working Capitol Hill on a more frequent basis these days is the NCBA's president-elect, Jennifer Houston. And Jennifer, we caught up with you during this year's spring legislative conference here in Washington, D.C. How did this year's conference go?
Oh, I think we've had a fantastic conference. We had cattlemen and cattlewomen from across the U.S. who took their time and their resources away from their farming operation, their ranching operation, to come up here to make a difference on Capitol Hill. And we know it does, because all of our congressmen talk about, we know when the cattlemen and cattlewomen are here.
You know, one thing about NCBA, it represents cattle operations of every size, the larger ones down to the smaller ones, and that's what makes this organization so unique and so powerful. When we have meetings like this one here in the nation's capital, everyone is truly represented.
Oh, absolutely, and we have representatives here from all sides, all types of operations, all segments of the industry, and it makes our voice stronger on Capitol Hill when we can speak with a united voice.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes we think about the cattle industry just being in the western part of the country or the central, but you yourself and your family make a living in the cattle industry in the eastern half of the United States.
Yes, sir. There's a lot of cattle in the southeast and whole eastern part of the U.S. And maybe we don't have the mystique of maybe some of the ranching heritage, but we have hard-working farmers that are out there taking care of their cattle every day.
Yes, you do. And no matter where you call home, the issues are truly the same. And let's talk about some of those big ones that are working their way through Congress right now. More importantly, the new Farm Bill. And a lot of new items are included in the Farm Bill that have an impact to livestock producers like yourself.
Yes, one of our biggest asks for our members as they talk to their congressmen and women, their senators up here, is that the foot and mouth disease bank be included in the Farm Bill. This is so important. It's a disease that has the potential to devastate all of us. And so we need a robust vaccine bank so that we can protect ourselves in the event we ever do have an incident. And people are very receptive to the need for this to protect our cattle herd.
You know, the NCBA has also worked hard within that new Farm Bill to make sure the conservation title has something for livestock producers as well.
Yes, sir. Equip funds are very important for our members. It helps us to build things that we need, to improve our facilities, and to take better care of our livestock on a day-to-day basis.
Your family owns an auction market where you call home, and a big issue for auction market owners, including livestock producers and those who haul our markets to and from markets like yours, this ELD and hours of service topic.
Yes, sir. Hours of service is a tremendously sensitive topic to us, not just in the Southeast, but as I travel across the U.S., it's important to the people in California because it's a big country and it's a long way, and we need some relief on hours of service because the big difference in us is we're hauling live cargo. We can't just stop when time runs out, and I think people realize that, and so we're asking for extensions, we're asking for something to give us some relief till we figure out what's an animal welfare issue as well as a safety and a transportation issue.
And with NCBA's help, we're hoping that a little bit of common sense in the end prevails. Last question for you, my friend. What about the issue of trade and the importance of keeping solid trade relationships with our trading partners around the world?
Trade is so important to the beef industry and the cattle industry. You know, we know it still contributes about $300 per head to every fed animal sold. That drifts back to what the feeder cattle that I sell at my market. We're looking at some trading irregularities right now, but we hope that NAFTA is going to get finished up soon. Of course, the free trade agreement with Korea. China needs to have their feet held to the fire. We've got access. We want to continue to have access. So we continue to work with the administration on a day-to-day basis to make sure that our farmers and ranchers have the accesses that they need.
Well, keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, a lot of positive momentum underway here in our nation's capital from those like Jennifer Houston who are back here working on all our behalf every single day. Again, Jennifer Houston, the NCBA's president-elect.
Thanks, Russell. There are many great reasons to become an NCBA member, and one of them is a chance to read the National Cattlemen. It's the official publication of NCBA and provides timely news and articles about the issues and events affecting the beef industry. A subscription is included free of charge when you become a member of NCBA. Just call 1-866-233-3872 Or you can visit the website ncba.org. Still ahead, it's time for a visit with our good friend Baxter Black. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you concerned about the impact government policies could have on your cattle business? One way to make your voice heard in Washington is by joining NCBA. When you join, you'll have access to key policy updates and insights from Beltway Beef. It's the best way to hear directly from NCBA's DC team. Beltway Beef provides valuable policy information, and it's free for NCBA members. Stay in touch with Beltway Beef. Join now at ncba.org.
Pardon me, if you're looking for Baxter Black, you know, the funny cowboy, he's right here with a special offer. 6-hour-long DVDs filled with live shows, Emmy-winning comedy, all Baxter at his best. And the price is right, $25 plus shipping. 800-654-2550 or online at baxterblack.com. As Farmer Bill from Alabama said, he's the only famous person I know who is just one of us.
Howdy. We know you're up before the dawn because the cattle rise before the sun. And you spend long hours in the saddle because the herd isn't always over the next rise. And you care for the land because you know it takes care of your family. And we know you do great work. And it's time to tell that story to the marketplace. IMI Global is here to help you do just that.
The goose population is on the rise, even to the point that some city dwellers are complaining of goose detritus and effluvia. But to wheat farmers on the flyway, the problem is less one of sanitation and more one of production, because the geese eat the newly sprouted wheat. Keith farms in north central Oklahoma. Geese have been regular squatters in his wheat fields for years, but the goose population explosion is taking its toll on his crop and his patience. Last season, some of his city friends asked to hunt pheasant on his place. They were welcome. Of course, Keith took them to the backside of his farm where he'd left some cover and dropped them off. When he picked him up later in the afternoon, he drove by his wheat fields. New growth was peaking up and adding unnatural green patches to the brown winter landscape. He also noted 500,000 geese had flown in and set up camp, and they were busily plucking the sprouts. "Boys," he said to his 3 Boone and Crockett buddies, "climb in the back and I'll take you for a goose run." Well, they did. Keith got on the inside of the hot wire, put it in 4-wheel drive, started down the edge of the field, and he was doing 50 miles an hour when he flew through the flurry of geese. The sky was black with them, the raucous honking was deafening, and suddenly, in the blink of an eye, he was clear of the geese, although it was impossible to see out of the windshield. Apparently, in an effort to lighten their load, the geese had performed a cloacal evacuation as they sailed over the cab. They looked like they had been in an oatmeal storm, maybe a cream of wheat drive-by creaming, or had stepped on a butterscotch mine. Goose droppings splattered their Eddie Bowers, smeared their Land's End, coated their Cabela's, lambasted their LL Beans, splattered, smeared, blinded, bluffed, and buffeted them as the blizzard of geese had flown over at ground zero. Their spokesman removed his Smith & Wesson sunglasses, revealing the only bare skin on his face. He looked like a pallid raccoon. "They shot first," he said. "We didn't have a chance." This is Baxter Black. From out there.
Thanks, Baxter. That sounds like a hunt those guys will never forget. Want to rewatch an episode of Cattlemen to Cattlemen or catch up on anything you've missed? Then visit our YouTube page. You'll find replays of all of our shows filled with educational segments and producer profiles from all around the country. It's also another chance to see Baxter Black. So check us out at youtube.com/Cattlemen to Cattlemen. We'll have more right after this.
Public land issues are somewhat unique.
The Public Lands Council is valuable to the ranchers because it's someone out there that's speaking their language.
Somebody has to communicate with the agencies, the BLM, the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife.
Well, the Public Lands Council has provided incredible information and help, I think, to all members of the Congress.
Everything from water rights to endangered species to wildfire to the need to actively manage the lands through grazing.
And there's always a new battle coming up.
The people on the land know much better what's good for them, their land, and their community than anybody in Washington ever will or ever has.
So for them to have someone who is out there helping send their message and helping them keep their industry alive, that's super important for them.
There's no way you can really put a value on what they do for us. So having someone in Washington, D.C., a voice for the industry, a voice for public land ranching, such as PLC, Public Lands Council, is huge.
No matter what job I've got to do, my John Deere 5E tractor can do it all. Whether I'm cutting, moving feed, or building a fence. Using my 5E means my work gets done faster at a price I can afford, and that works for me.
Welcome back. As a viewer of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'd like to hear from you. If you have questions or comments or even a story idea for us, drop us an email and we may use them on a future show. Send us your thoughts at our email address, c2c@beef.org. And you can always reach us and NCBA through the NCBA website, that's ncba.org. We're wrapping up this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen with one more look at Hats on the Hill at the NCBA Legislative Conference. That wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We'll see you again next week, right here on RFD TV.